Welcome everyone to a new video. Today we'll be going over everything about factions by Yakker's Tutorials. We'll be covering everything from the British, the French, the colonist, and the native possibilities and factions. At the moment, the servers are mostly peaceful as it's still in the alpha testing phase with about the 50 to 60 selected people, so there isn't that much action. As I'm loading in, you may want to note that at the current time, there is one more team than the pre-alpha had originally offered, the French team. At the moment, I am able to play on this team, as most players are, to explore where the fortress is. For the moment, during the alpha test, when the game is actually released, both BCF and French will be group locked, meaning you'll have to join those actual groups to join those main factions of the game. Colonists and native factions are available to link a group into the game by paying 100 Robux to make a faction at the moment, which may be slightly more, by the way. I'm not exactly sure on that price. But you'll be able to link a Roblox group in, and all the roles will go over the person's head. You'll be able to have a faction logo, and as well a uniform, as well as a beret, and plenty of other customizations for the actual game, including color scheme and other things that you would like to be in the game for your team and faction. So what are factions? This is something that often isn't described too much in the actual community if you ask, because they're very hard to describe. What they are major groups of people that basically have a unifying idea of who they're against and who they're with to kind of just form this group of people that generally fight. A lot of times you'll see a bunch of different types of warfare and also a siding towards the British or the French. Now, in this type of game where it creates this type of a quad neutral spectrum between the British, the French, the colonists, and the natives, mostly within the factions, and anyone that doesn't play with a faction is considered to be a neutral player base and can also be recruited. So oftentimes, if you guys are interested in joining a different faction or joining a faction in general, you can often be recruited by walking up and asking a high rank of a faction, or even a medium rank, because many of them are looking to rank up, and oftentimes that's what factions are. So what you often want to be doing in a faction is fighting some kind of combat mission or something else, or just hanging out with players to generally get to know them. It's sort of like having a family in the game and meeting a few people, as well as fighting battles and having a ton of fun and making money. So the ultimate goal of a faction generally is to say a unifying goal and just fight it out for that exact goal, and that is the main point of a faction. However, they usually create families and bonds throughout the time that they are a faction. So what are the benefits of joining a faction? See, the primary benefits of joining a faction is the fact that you're going to be on the war front. When you're on the war front, there's a lot of pride and also valor in doing that, but not only that, you make a lot of money in the game. By making this amount of money in the game, a lot of times you're able to rank up in that group, as well as fighting for them on that front line. It usually will provide a lot of experience within the game and quite a bit of entertainment. So joining a faction usually benefits both parties, not only you, but the faction in general, and also you're going to be fighting for that faction and whatever their cause generally is. The most important aspects about factions are also the fact that the game is mostly revolving around them within the combat aspect, and if you are decently interested in fighting within the game, you pretty much should join a faction, or else you're probably going to get targeted on the battlefield. There's going to be issues with you not being able to fight on islands, because you can only teleport to an island if you are in a faction, so it's recommended you join one. And atop all of that, you primarily want to be the person that is going to be ranking up, making an army yourself eventually, which is the ultimate goal of joining a faction overall, is to either become part of their family, become part of that legion or division that they are fighting for their cause, or you want to make your own and kind of make your way by joining in the game, starting up with a faction. So in either way, it is a very, very good idea just to begin working with them, and also, of course, economic upturn. Now let's delve into actually the two main factions of the game, the British and the French. We'll begin with the British side. BCF, British Colonial Forces, are the main faction and currently the most powerful within the game. To my knowledge, the French may dispute this, however, they are the most powerful at the very moment. They have approximately, at the time this video releases, 1,300 members. They are fighting for the side of the British, and the goal is to preserve peace throughout the frontier and to promote one major order within the game. Now we move on to the French. The French side are fighting pretty much for the same thing the British are. They're fighting for unity and one side to be in power over the game, which is their ultimate goal, and therefore the French and the British are already at war. If I hadn't mentioned that before, it is decently obvious. because they pretty much do hate each other. So what happens with this is that factions that are somewhat in between current factions that exist and current factions that will exist, which most of them aren't currently in the game but eventually will be, will have to sort of switch to one or the other side. However, they can also be just against both sides and fighting for a third opinion or a third perspective on the game for them to be the power or the major superpower of the game as a faction as a whole. And we will definitely see a lot of this in the future, but I think it will be much more common to see more either vassals or allies of the main factions of the game to try to overtake each other, because British and French are obviously going to be major powers as they have their own buildings in the game that I mentioned in the last video, and in my next videos I will be looking at those a little bit more and going into depth on some of the strategies to attack and defend those. But not only that, it will definitely be such a perspective on what is happening in the game and back to what the players currently want. So overall, there's definitely going to be a lot of deception and also a lot of allies made in the early part of the game, to where I think it's not going to be as combat heavy up until probably 2 or 3 weeks after the real release. So how to get recruited to a faction. I understand quite significantly that a lot of people that are watching this video understand that there are factions out there and they're either already in one or they're looking to be in one at this point. If you've watched the video for this long, most likely you do. I hope. But at the very least, if you do want to join a faction, hit up any medium rank or high rank within the game from a faction, and I would seriously recommend that you go to them and try to get lightly supplied and basically get into that group. Once you're in that group, and once you're primaried to that group in the faction, you'll be able to somewhat get in and understand it, join their Discord, do all the things like that, make sure you're in everything, and then by that point I would consider yourself part of that family. Once you're in a faction, there's so much that you can possibly do, anywhere from making money to attacking other factions to going to war to just ranking up and being quite a big part and just making somewhat a family of your own there. So I would highly recommend that you do something like that to get the experience, to get everything that you need in the game, and moving forwards to do so much more than what you could do without a faction. So some of the major questions that are commonly asked to me about factions is, why should I exactly join a faction? And the reasons I provided throughout this video, I hope, entail a little bit about that, but the major reason that I personally would join a faction is because it's a major aspect of the game. When you do join a faction, it's basically putting you as part of the military of the game, putting you with friends and people that you can meet throughout the game, and just have a better experience in general. If you want to play the game every day, it's the best way to do it. You'll be constantly doing events, you'll be constantly in the battlefield, and just having a ton more fun than generally what you can do otherwise in the game, so I would highly recommend you do something like that. Now later on in a few weeks I'll be covering the history of factions, mostly because I want to kind of describe what was happening in the past in the previous games up until this point, and in the future what will also happen in predicted battles, going over battles, and overviews of course, are going to be in separate videos. This is primarily to understand why a faction exists and how to join one. Other than that, I will also be doing how-to series very, very soon on how to join BCF and how to join the French faction that is currently in the game, as well as generally how factions actually work in the game and how to tie a Roblox group in and create one. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. I appreciate it a ton. You're more than welcome to join our Discord, the game's Discord. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter at YarkerOfficial. And of course, subscribe and leave a like if you guys could. It would mean a ton. It helps. Feel free to leave a comment down below as well. It does mean a ton. Trying to get in the algorithm right now, it just helps out so much. So thank you guys very, very much, and I'll see you guys next time.